forget. Sometimes we never forget. Haven't seen the end of it yet. We'll fight as long as we live. All eyes on the hidden door to the lonely mountain road. We'll ride in a gathering storm till we get our long forgotten goal.
Okay, so welcome to Tech Chat number 29, revised. I did an hour program where I talked about some things, and YouTube took down a video, and now I have 2 strikes against me. So the video was about an hour long, and some of the stuff I talked about in the beginning video with gaslighting and mis and disinformation is going to be missing from this new revised version. I'm just going to leave the part where I read off about something that I wrote directly in my book about order following, and how it's not very spiritual to follow orders, and how you could be at war within yourself for following orders. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't think they'll take this one down. It's very important to understand that we are in, and that this is a pandemic. And then I seen a headline when I opened up my browser that there's proof that there is war crimes going on. And just the absurdity of that statement was funny to me, because war is a fucking crime. So how can there be war crimes? The whole war is a crime. All wars are crimes against humanity. So anyway, I hope this next version of Tech Chat number 29 stays up. I will have a website up soon. And I'm honored that I've gotten videos taken down, because I stand for freedom, not fucking communism. At any rate, I hope this video finds everybody healthy. Stay safe. Until next time. Traitor to fucking humanity. Traitor to humanity. If it was even him. So I got to wonder, what was he read in on? These are the kind of things I think about. What was he read in on to make him change all of a sudden? And it'd be real nice to say, oh, he's just an order follower. He's following orders too. I don't know. I've seen some people throughout history who were beloved by their troops for reasons. He was one of them, and all of a sudden he changed. So that makes me wonder. So what I have here, the next part, is probably going to be the most interesting part of this. I wrote this in my book. This is what I wrote in my book, and I'm going to read it here, and I'll give a little bit of explanation about it. But this is part of what I wrote in my book. Rise from Darkness. Who are they? I'm going to read it word for word. All right. So then we arrive at the profession itself, and I'm referring to order following, which is filled with inherent evil that leads to apathy and self-loathing. For me, all the contradicting, greed-driven principles within criminal justice had me at war within myself. Following immoral orders to take actions against people for victimless crimes is morally wrong. Being a revenue generator is also morally wrong because it is theft. But by far the worst and most self-loathing order we follow are the orders to inaction, which we've seen a lot of in 2020, didn't we? No one was ever harmed due to my inactions. But they become self-loathing because inaction most often involves lack of courage. Victimless crimes, I'll give something real quick on that. In every state of the country, if there's a law saying something's illegal and it's the same in every state, like assault and murder and trespassing, that means it's because it's against natural law. If it's legal in one state but illegal in another state, and then legal in that state, like smoking pot or carrying a gun for self-defense, those things aren't illegal in nature. They're not immoral. So if the law changes from state to state, it's actually moral to do. If it if it's the same in every state, that doesn't automatically mean that it's immoral. But in most cases, like with murder and stuff like that, the states have that right, at least in our country. So the above, I'm going to be continuing here. The above mentioned details are merely contributing factors that for many lead to seeking unhealthy escapisms for those employed as police or military, aka order followers. But make no mistake about this, they are not the underlying main causal factors. An understanding of the underlying causal factor for the spiritual bankruptcy found amongst all order followers was something that had been laying just beneath the surface of my subconscious for years. I was never able to quite put my finger on it. After all, I was one of the good cops, right? I can go into all kinds of examples of good done by cops, including myself, but virtue signaling will not and does not address the main causal factor for the moral corruption and spiritual bankruptcy, which is so inherent and abhorrent in the order following professions filled with contradictions. And that is the reason contradictions, all of which create great internal conflict, which get fragmented off and buried. We pretend it does not exist. It creates a complete cognizant dissonance. It's the contradictions that create that internal conflict within you. You hope they go away, and you just do the best you can within a system that's immoral in itself. All right, I'm just going to continue. The average lifespan of a career cop is 57 years. Order following jobs also have the highest divorce, alcohol abuse, and prescription drug use rates of any other profession. A chronic adaptation to constant violence is apathy, which is always coupled with a lack of empathy. The job itself will put you under metaphorical assault from all sides. That is, from the public, from peers, and especially from your management. The contradictions inherent in this line of work range from situational enforcement, which boils down to the enforcement of selected laws for selected people, of any given politician's arbitrarily passed legislations, to the very real feeling of being used as some puppet master's personal from the movie Princess Bride Brute Squad, or pawn in their Game of Thrones. And I was a victim. I was a pawn in a Game of Thrones on an apartment. So many of the laws cops are required to arbitrarily enforce are assaulting to our own sensibilities and ultimately to our very souls, namely all law violations with victimless crimes. Something all police know and sometimes will admit is that policing is largely reactionary. Police do not show up until after the crime. Your safety is by and large really in your own hands to begin with. This is straight. And I wrote this was finished like by May of 2020. This book was done. I have seen some cops who would only mess with those they felt to be no real threat to them, and they were not evil or potentially violent, because doing so was safe. Going after actual thugs can be dangerous after all. As an aside, when the exaggerated propaganda of the coronavirus began being spread, I tried to warn left-wing, very political friends of mine that the government may be lying about the virus, to which I was reminded, with the attempted weaponization of shame by a so-called friend, that I was talking about a government I once so proudly represented as a cop. My reply to her was simple, direct, and honest. Proud is not the word I would use to describe that service. Shame would be more of an accurate description. I then went on to explain that it was because of my intimate knowledge of that system that she should consider listening to me. I had a nickname given to me by a supervisor, IA. Okay, my last name's Arnold, so he called me Individual Arnold. That's something they'd have in the military. When you were messing up in boot camp, the drill instructor would be like, oh, so we're just an individual now. So he'd call me Individual Arnold, which stood for Individual Arnold. As in, we just want to be an individual, don't we? It is a military thing where there were no individuals. I would rather be individual IA, which is Individual Arnold, than AI, artificial intelligence, which is what they ultimately prefer. And isn't it weird that 2 years later, artificial intelligence is what's being talked about a lot? I wrote this was finished in May of 2020. I could write a whole book on this, and maybe someday I will, but I do not want to use any of this as an excuse for my own immoral behaviors and unhealthy coping mechanisms. I was in a morally wrong profession and handled my stress wrongly, period. Yeah, I talk about comic books because I've been a comic book geek my whole life, right? I got into law enforcement to serve. I got into law enforcement to make a difference. A lot of people get into it because we really think we're going to make a difference and help people, and we want to serve something greater than ourselves, and it's how we're socially engineered. I'll say it over and over again, and a lot of people end up at great conflict within themselves and at great bitterness. You'll see a lot of bitter people. They originally got into it for good. The bitter ones got into it for good reasons. The gleefully happy, violent ones are psychotic. Those ones scare me. Actually, they all scare me at this point because ultimately they're just doing their job. That's the excuse they're always going to make. And this is why I'm going to talk to you guys all the time. I was one of you. With what's going on in the world, you have to be the ones to say, no, we're not doing that. Okay, when people were protesting, not violently, when they were peacefully protesting, and you were standing on one side to do whatever, you should have stepped across sides and protested with them, with your fellow citizens. Okay, being an oath keeper doesn't mean being a job keeper. I'm going to continue to say that. So I was on Facebook, and they were talking about the Punisher and how the Punisher is racist. Again, this gets back to, and this is comic book related, this gets back to they're using a racial dialectic. They're using whatever medium they can to brainwash people, to mind control people, okay? And so this is what I had to write about it, because the news symbol that I didn't even bother putting on here has horns. Again, it's satanic, is what it really is. But reading posts that people puke about race and politics in comic book threads are funny to me. I can relate to Frank Castle's self-hate at times. Below was a recent post I made about Marvel's Punisher in response. I put this on my Facebook page. The Punisher is right. The system has and will continue to fail. All the governments of the world are immoral trash who rule their citizens with euphemized violence or the threat of violence if their arbitrary dictates aren't followed. The police and military are the enforcement, order-following class that enforce those immoral dictates. The Punisher knows this and got sick of it. In fact, the often portrayed level of self-loathing in his character reveals this. It has nothing to do with the race issue being used as a Hegelian dialectic that is sadly little more than mind control. So, there's a lot of times you see this self-loathing that the Punisher has. And that's the reason why. They're not talking about that. And it's just a comic book. But again, comic books, other books, social media platforms, everything they're putting in a browser news feed, on TV, is all to brainwash you. It's all to keep you in a state of fear. It's all to have you vibrating at these lower consciousness states. We need to vibrate at a higher love consciousness state. And you can't be in fear if you're vibrating in a state of love. And you could be in a complete state of love and still be consciously angry. I think there's nothing wrong with getting fucking angry. By all means, get angry. I dig the anger. Get angry, and let's get enough people to get angry together, if we must, to rise from this darkness that these people are putting us in. In order to get out of that line of work, it took balanced shadow work. And what I mean by balanced shadow work is, shadow work is sort of a way of life. You're going to constantly have to go back and weed that garden, okay, to maintain it. You can't just meditate once or twice, do yoga, and say, hey, I'm enlightened now. It doesn't work like that. And shadow work is scary. Yeah, I've been in front of the mirror in tears before. I drove by a police car once and almost started crying because they can't possibly be the bad guys, right? I put in my book on how I was abused really badly as a child. And, whenever the police showed up, they'd take the bad man away. Those were heroes to me as a kid. And to understand, I know there's a lot of good cops out there that are at war within themselves over this. I'm not against you. I'm for you. Get out of that line of work. Don't follow immoral orders or arrest those that see, they're going to make it harder for you to, they're going to obfuscate what's moral, what's not moral. So anything that takes away the rights of another human being is immoral, okay? Under natural law. The Constitution of the United States has this one part right. Anything that's repugnant to the Constitution, any law that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void, okay? Follow that. it's going to take courage to either do that or quit the job to keep your oath and protect. That's the real oath, to protect. So balanced shadow work is sitting in the mirror and figuring that out. It's not easy. And I use this for a reason, because that mirror needs to be closed and the medicine that's behind it needs to be thrown away, and the mirror needs to be closed, and it's the medicine in front of it that's going to actually save you. It's when you can redevelop that self-love and that self-esteem to rise from darkness and not be scared anymore. To actually have heart-based intelligence and love. I see a lot of anger that comes from some people, and I see the love that's in that anger. It's not mindless anger. It's good anger. And, it needs to be embraced. It needs to be understood. So shadow work is a way of life that requires balance without self-reflection and introspection. There could be no forward growth. Part of this is admitting when you were wrong. So the game that I have for people is find a time that you can admit that you were in the wrong. Okay, and not just, well, I was wrong to think that they were not as smart, or I was wrong to think that they had more compassion than they did, or no, that's not admitting you're wrong. That's saying they're wrong. Find one time in your life where you were in the wrong. And it's especially for people on the left. That's what shadow work is partially about. It's bringing into the conscious light where you were wrong. That which you didn't realize was unconscious. You have to be able to admit you're wrong. And again, the final thing I'll say on that is always saying you're wrong is not a virtue. Okay? A lot of times we try to point out where we were wrong in some type of conflict, and really that's just our ego, because we want to think like we had some kind of control over something that we really had no control over. You weren't wrong. You had no control over it. So always being wrong is not a virtue either. That's why I say balanced shadow work. But again, this brings us back to, this right here. This brings us back to freedom. And the only way we're going to be able to be in a state of freedom is to have a higher moral consciousness, to show more love towards our fellow human being, to quit othering people. We are all one. We are all symbionts on this planet. And until we can raise ourselves level of consciousness, the bad guys are going to win. And they're going to keep winning. We have to ask the bigger questions. What is it they want? Why do they want us enslaved? We are higher sentient beings. No one's going to enslave us. But us. Okay? With that being said, man, I just want to wish everybody love. And, stay safe, stay healthy. Please have courage. And until next Tech Chat, man, stay safe. This was Tech Chat 29.